Hey, it's Coach Tony here from Sobertise. How are you? So I'm answering common questions about alcohol, and this one is, how long does it take for the alcohol to leave the body after you've been drinking? Now, there's probably two contexts for this particular question. So it's a pretty common one. Uh, One might be the short-term view. You've been down the pub, you've had a few beers. How long does it take for the alcohol to leave your body? So that would be the metabolic rate. A standard drink of alcohol, how much of that ends up in the bloodstream of a person depends on the individual, their size, their weight. Are they male? Are they female? And one standard drink, it'll be anywhere between 0.01 to 0.03% per standard drink. So it's a bit difficult to sort of do rule of thumbs on, if I have three beers, I'll be, 0.06%. If I have one glass of wine, I might be 0.05%, which is why the authorities, don't encourage us to drive after we've been drinking because we can't tell how much alcohol is actually in our bloodstream. But the general rate that the liver processes the alcohol is going to be 0.01 to 0.015% per hour, right? So if your blood alcohol level is 0.05, potentially it's going to take up to 5 hours for that blood alcohol level to reduce back to zero. And then alongside of that blood alcohol level, you're going to have things like, feeling fuzzy, a headache maybe low energy, maybe you've consumed a lot of snacks and things in the pub, maybe you had a lot of salt, you're feeling dehydrated. So those effects might take longer to dissipate out of the body. For the longer term view, let's say we've got somebody that's been drinking heavy over a period of time and they decide that they're going to give up drinking. Now, we've got to be careful in this situation as well because a small percentage of drinkers are going to be physically dependent on alcohol. In other words, they depend on the presence of alcohol in their body to keep specific symptoms at bay. And that's going to be things like tremors, hallucinations, uh, and those sort of more high-end things that happen with heavy drinkers. Most people can safely stop alcohol, but that percentage of people, roughly about 10%, need to be medically supervised when they stop drinking. Now, if there's any doubt about, you know, what your level of drinking is and whether or not you may have symptoms like that, like hallucinations or tremors, excessive sweating, confusion, those sorts of things mean that you're possibly dependent on alcohol, and it can be life-threatening if you remove the alcohol from your system. But for the moderate to heavy drinkers, it can take up to 48 hours to 72 hours for the physical effects of alcohol to leave the body. Excessive heavy drinkers may take longer, but it could be, they fall into that band of physically dependent, could be life-threatening for those people to give up drinking. After around 7 days, the individual will start to feel a bit brighter. Now, some drinkers will probably possibly have cravings from, day one through to day seven, right? It depends on the individual. It might take up to 14 days for sleep to go back to something that resembles normal patterns, not waking in the night, not excessive sweating through the night, proper dreaming returns, not nightmares. So REM sleep, if you're having dreams that have got lots of bits and pieces in there, maybe color and stuff like that, that they're not threatening or they're not, you don't wake up in a cold sweat, but you're getting good quality sleep and you're dreaming, could mean that you're getting your REM sleep. Right, that's important for, the brain to detox and get rid of stuff that accumulates in the brain during the day. After 14 days, though, an individual may still feel like it's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? Because the brain has not normalized for the absence of alcohol. Now, you may or may not be aware that heavy drinkers, um, the brain anticipates the time that you drink and actually starts to drop neurotransmitters into the brain and stimulants. And it takes a while for that process. Now, that happens even if you don't drink, you get these stimulants and you get these dampeners that hit the brain in anticipation of alcohol. You take away the alcohol, the brain still does that. So it takes a while for that process to settle down. Other things that might happen after 14 days might be noticed, things like appetite, even weight loss may be noted because you're not drinking those excessive calories and you're not snacking, right? Your appetites improve. You don't want to eat junk food all the time. After about a month or so, the skin will start to look better. I used to look really blotchy and red-faced when I was drinking, and there's photos of me all puffy and not looking very good. Blood pressure can reduce if the drinking causes a spike. Now, that was my case. Over the time that I was drinking, my blood pressure went up and up and up. And when I stopped, after a while, I started having little dizzy spells, and I sort of checked my blood pressure, and I found that my blood pressure had returned back to normal. So I was taking blood pressure pills to reduce it further, and it was dropping into the I'm getting dizzy when I stand up suddenly. So under medical supervision, I stopped taking the blood pressure pills, and my blood pressure went back to normal levels for my age. After about 3 months, the sense of health improves. Mentally, you may still be a bit down if the brain hasn't caught up yet with the normalization of its neurotransmitters, dampers, and stimulants. But by year's end, if you didn't experience physical withdrawal symptoms and cravings, you should really start to feel the benefits of being alcohol free. So don't be surprised, if you're expecting to feel fantastic after about 2 or 3 weeks, don't be surprised if it's, 3 months to 12 months before you feel, like you used to before you started drinking. All right, so I hope that helps. If you need more information, certainly there's plenty of information on the internet to answer that question. But people ask coaches during coaching sessions, like, how long is this going to take? How long before I feel better? And I can give that sort of timeline. All right.